Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Mr. Pad Paramahansa Varudikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Varudikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta-vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, so this is... So, correct me if I'm wrong. We're on text 23. Okay. Page 366. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this third day of March 2021, the glorious appearance day of His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we are studying from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 8 entitled Attaining the Supreme, text number 23, at the bottom of the page 366. Oh boy. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to announce that again. On this third day of March, appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we are studying the Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, text 23 of chapter 8 entitled Attaining the Supreme. Yatra kale tvanavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha Priyata yantitam kalam Bhakshyami bharatashabha Yatra kale tvanavrittim Avrittim chaiva yoginaha Priyata yantitam kalam Bhakshyami bharatashabha Yatra kaletvana vrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha priyata yanti tam kalam vakshami bharatarshava. Yatra kaletvana vrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha priyata kantikam kalam vakshami bharatarshava. Yatra kaletvana vrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha priyata yanti tam kalam vakshami bharatarshava. Dhanavari, you with us?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, he's not with us today.
Okay.
She's not with us today.
Any other ladies want to try? Yatra kaletvana vrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha priyata yanti tam kalam vakshami bharatarshava. Yatra, at which, kale, time, to, and anavrittim, no return, avrittim, return, cha, also eva, certainly, yoginaha, different kinds of mystics, priyataha, having departed, yanti, attain, tam, that, kalam, time, vakshyami, I shall describe, bharata rishabha, O best of the Bharatas. Translation. O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which, passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. Purport. The unalloyed devotees of the Supreme Lord, who are totally surrendered souls, do not care when they leave their bodies or by what method. They leave everything in Krishna's hands and so easily and happily return to Godhead. But those who are not unalloyed devotees and who depend instead on such methods of spiritual realization as karma yoga, jnana yoga, and hatha yoga, must leave the body at a suitable time in order to be sure of whether or not they will return to the world of birth and death. If the yogi is perfect, he can select the time and situation for leaving this material world. But if he is not so expert, his success depends on his accidentally passing away at a certain suitable time. The suitable times at which one passes away and does not come back are explained by the Lord in the next verse. According to Acharya Baladeva Jabusha, the Sanskrit word kala used herein refers to the presiding deity of time. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So once again, looking at the context, we see that the previous verse, text 22, Krishna described Ananya Bhakti, that this is really the surest way of success in trying to escape from the round of birth and death. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attained by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading and everything is situated within him. So that's why Srila Prabhupada says in the purport to this verse, 23, that we read, that unalloyed devotees of the Lord who are totally surrendered do not care when they leave their bodies or by what method. So now Krishna is going to say something. It's kind of intriguing here, because all of a sudden he's talking about the time when you leave the body, as if it's kind of a luck, if you leave at this time, you go back. If you leave at that time, you go back. But you have to remember that he's speaking about the yogis here. He's not talking about anybody, yogina. It's not just any old person leaves at a certain time and he goes back to Godhead. If they're tightly bound by the laws of karma and they haven't any assets in yoga, then they're going to come back for sure. So this is some advanced yogis, and this kind of the time helps them. So that's what he's talking about here. Okay, let's go on. Agnir Jyoti Ahak Shukla Shanmasa Uttarayanam Tatra Payata Gachanti Brahma Vidojanaha Those who know the Supreme Brahman attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery god in the light at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. Purport. When fire, light, day, and the fortnight of the moon are mentioned, it is to be understood that over all of them there are various presiding deities who make arrangements for the passage of the soul. At the time of death, the mind carries one on the path to a new life. If one leaves the body at the time designated above, either accidentally or by arrangement, it is possible for him to attain the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. Mystics who are advanced in yoga practice can arrange the time and place to leave the body. Others have no control. If by accident they leave at an auspicious moment, then they will not return to the cycle of birth and death. But otherwise there is every possibility that they will have to return. However, for the pure devotee in Krishna consciousness, there is no fear of returning, whether he leaves the body at an auspicious or inauspicious moment, by accident or arrangement. So once again, the purpose of this, these few verses that Krishna is going to speak now, you'll see at the end of the chapter. He says that the devotees don't have to worry about this, And this is all kind of a technical arrangement that pertains to those who still have a lot of ties to this world, but can make great progress by leaving at an auspicious moment. So, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, we find Krishna says, after all is said and done, he says, Sarva dharmam parityajya mame kang sharanam braja. That's the essential verse. He says that give up all these other religions I spoke about, all these other restrictions and everything, and karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, whatever, and just surrender unto me. I'll take care of everything. Your sins will be completely eradicated. In the previous verse, he assures him that you'll come to me, just become my devotee, bow down to me, offer your homage to me, worship me. So that's the essence. All of these other things are for those who are not willing to really surrender fully, but you're still within the Vedic paradigm, and so you have this to do, that to do, this, so many things to worry about. So you'll see at the end, and during the purports, Prabhupada makes it clear that if you want to be on the safe side, and especially if we're not part of the Vedic culture, we come from various backgrounds, the only safe path for us is absolute surrender to Krishna through the spiritual master and through the Shastra as we have it. These other things are just deviations. The Bhagavatam begins, the Srimad Bhagavatam begins from this principle of surrender. Right at the beginning, second chapter of the entire 18,000 verse work, the second verse says, Dharma projita kaitavo tra. Here, atra means here. Here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, all the cheating religions are kicked out. Well, then you have to know what is a cheating religion. Well, a cheating dharma is any dharma that's materially motivated. And that's what most people are doing. They may be in the Vedas or they may be outside of the Vedic paradigm, but they're still ultimately looking for some aggrandizement, going to the heavenly planets, attaining some great wealth on this planet, some position, good beauty, whatever it may be. This is until we're cured of that false ego, that is the reference point. So Bhagavad Gita says no. Here, the other parts of the Vedas, you can do the Karma Kanda section and so many other things if you want to go to heaven, fine, But not in this. This is the ripened fruit of all the Vedic literature. This is the essence of the meaning of the Vedanta Sutra is explicated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This very verse at the end says, what's the need of any other Shastra? If you simply hear Bhagavatam nicely, you follow the instructions, you'll have the Lord manifest in your heart, and you go back to Godhead, which is the ultimate goal of life. So we should keep everything in perspective. And the Bhagavad Gita is spoken as kind of the ABCs, and it's understood that people are coming from all different directions and going to read this Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna is trying to draw, the essence of karma yoga is bhakti, is sacrifice for Krishna. The essence of jnana is understanding oneself to be a pure spirit and eternal servant of the Supreme Spirit. The essence of dhyana yoga is to always remember the lotus feet of Krishna. So it all comes back to pure bhakti in the end. So that's just, as we read these kind of intriguing verses, you'll see what happens. And at the end of the chapter, Krishna will reconcile everything. a couple of verses. All right, text 25, unless there's some questions, comments. Text 25, Dumalatris tata Krishna Shanmasa Dakshinayanam Tatta Chandramasam Jyotir Yogi Prapya Nivartate. The mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, reaches the moon planet, but again comes back. Purport. In the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Kapila Muni mentions that those who are expert in fruitive activities and sacrificial methods on earth attain to the moon at death. These elevated souls live on the moon for about 10,000 years by demigod calculations and enjoy life by drinking soma ras. They eventually return to earth. This means that on the moon there are higher classes of living beings, though they may not be perceived by our gross senses. Shukla Krishne Gatiyete Jagatak Shashvate Mate Ekaya Yatyana Vrittim Anyaya Vartate Punaha. According to Vedic opinion, there are 2 ways of passing from this world, one in light and one in darkness. When one passes in light, he does not come back, but when one passes in darkness, he returns. Purport. The same description of departure and return is quoted by Acharya Baladev Vijayabhushan from the Chandogya Upanishad 5.10, 3-5. Those who are fruitive laborers and philosophical speculators from time immemorial are constantly going and coming. Actually, they do not attain ultimate salvation, for they do not surrender to Krishna. Naite suti partajanan yogi muhyati kashtana tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhavarjana. Although the devotees know these 2 paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. Purport. Krishna is here advising Arjuna that he should not be disturbed by the different paths the soul can take when leaving the material world. A devotee of the Supreme Lord should not worry whether he will depart by arrangement or by accident. The devotee should be firmly established in Krishna consciousness and chant Hare Krishna. He should know that concern over either of these 2 paths is troublesome. The best way to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness is to be always dovetailed in his service, and this will make one's path to the spiritual kingdom safe, certain, and direct. The word Yoga Yukta is especially significant in this verse. One who is firm in yoga is constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness in all his activities. Sri Rupa Goswami advises, Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjata. One should be unattached in material affairs and do everything in Krishna consciousness. By this system, which is called Yukta Vairagya, one attains perfection. Therefore, the devotee is not disturbed by these descriptions, because he knows that his passage to the Supreme Abode is guaranteed by devotional service. So one thing about the bhakti path, as we are trying to follow it, and as it's described and detailed in books like the Nectar of Devotion and the Chaitanya Charitamrita, is that this deep concern: am I coming back? Am I not coming back? Am I going back to guided? I chanted my rounds, every day. I followed the 4 regs pretty closely. How come I didn't get to go back to guided? Am I sure going? That's not the unalloyed path. The unalloyed path of bhakti that we're following, you come to the point of, I don't care if I go back to guided, as long as I'm serving Krishna. We find that amongst the songs of the great devotees, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is singing, just let me be born in the house of a devotee. Let me be born as an insect, on the wall, as long as I get the association of devotees and I can hear the transcendental sounds of, the glorification of the Lord. Some of the great devotees of Lord Chaitanya, we heard about Vasudev Dutt, he was so advanced that he was even ready to take on all the sinful reactions of all the people in the universe. And he said to Lord Chaitanya directly, just let me suffer here forever, and they can all go back to Godhead. Lord Chaitanya embraced him, said, you're the greatest Vaishnav. You don't have to suffer all those. They'll be delivered just by your desire. This kind of mood of selfless service and compassion and love is what the pure devotees are feeling. So there's an evolution. Just wanted to welcome Jessica. Nice to see you. How's my old friend Berlioz? He's doing good? Yeah. Tell him I was asked about him. She has this incredible son who in the kirtan, he's completely fired up and enlivened and running back and forth, dancing like anything. They're keeping him safe because of the COVID, but let me open up again. So, where was I? Lost my train. So the idea is that there's an evolution of our desires. The whole thing is an evolution of desire. And Prabhupada quotes this two lines, or one line here from the verse by Rupa Goswami. This anasaktas vishayan yatahama bhayunjata, he's describing what actual vairagya is. Yukta vairagya means detachment in yoga. There's also something called polgu vairagya. Any of the residents know what that means? Polgu vairagya? I'm sorry? Yeah, polgu means weak, you see. In other words, detachment that's really not very strong. Yukta vairagya is very firm. So he's describing this. It's very important because Krishna consciousness is based on, the advancement, these two things. Progressive attachment to Krishna, raga. There's another raga nuga. This is what we're supposed to be following in the footsteps of those who are very much attached to Krishna and love for Krishna. Anuga means going behind, following. But material raga is what keeps us attached here to this world, engaging in sense gratification and planting desires for more sense gratification in the mind. And then, as we just read at the beginning of this chapter, if your mind is filled with those desires, that what takes you to your next material birth. Those unfulfilled desires plus whatever karma you have, and you stay bound up tightly. So raga is the key, the attachment. As spirit souls, we are going to become attached. If we're not attached to Krishna, we're going to be attached to Maya. So the whole art and science of Bhakti Yoga is geared toward sublimating, I love that word, sublimating our material desires into spiritual desires. And that has been worked out, the science of it has been worked out, based especially in this age on the chanting of the holy name. What does Krishna mean? It means all attractive. Krishna means to pull. The word karshati means to pull. It's used oftentimes in farming because they're always pulling that plow, But Krishna is called Krishna because he's all attractive. The problem is we're so covered over, we're purposely turning away from Krishna, and because we are by nature beings that become attracted, we become attracted to the material world. And we've been trying to fulfill our desires for exchange of love and gratification in the material sphere and staying bound up and suffering repeatedly. Birth, death, old age, and disease, and the threefold miseries. So now, if we understand that, it's simply a question of reforming our consciousness by turning it toward Krishna. And the holy name, as we know, the Hare Krishna mantra, is non-different from Krishna. That name itself is all attractive. Now, because we're so united, we feel the potency of it, but not the full potency. When we chant purely, free of the offenses and contaminating, complete concentration, we'll feel that presence of Krishna in his holy name and the attraction. And proportionately, our attraction for this material world will decrease. So that's what he's describing. Anasaktas vishayan yataham apayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandha yuktam vairagyamuchyate. That's the completion of the one line here Prabhupada quotes. So what does that mean? Anasaktas means without attachment. Anasaktas vishayan. Vishayan are the object of the senses, which we can be attracted to. Like all of these nice foodstuffs that are prepared and offered to the Lord, prasadam. That can just as easily be found in a restaurant, an Indian restaurant somewhere, And there's nothing transcendental about it. It's just they're attracting your tongue. So this very same food, this very same preparations can be a source of attachment to this world and ignorance, or can help us go back to God. And how? Because they're prepared with devotion, offered with devotion, and hopefully honored with devotion. It's an exchange of love, And so, what's the result? As I've experienced, many of you experienced, you become less attracted. Things that you might have eaten before, you said, "Oh God, how could I have eaten that?" I'll never eat that kind of thing again. I'm only going to eat prasadam, So that's a good example. So engaging the things of this world, and that means all of our senses, whatever we have in our orbit. Upayunjita. Yunjita is a derivative of the word yoga in linking itself to Krishna. Just like this temple. A temple is meant for engaging all of our senses in Krishna, just like an arti. What happens in an arti? The curtains open. First of all, your eyes are dazzled by the beauty of the deities, right? The fragrance of the incense, and maybe the flowers if they're in season, But the fragrance is there, touching the lamp, right? The sense of touch, And of course the active senses and the voice in chanting and the feet in sing. So all this it's a very sensual experience, which is good because it's linking you to Krishna. That's the whole idea. Out of mercy, Krishna agrees to appear by the will and the desire of the pure devotee, to give us a chance to see him and serve him in a form that we can see him and serve him in. We can't see this spiritual form with our eyes at this time. So we're becoming purified. All the senses that are engaged that way. The hands, the feet, but to speak of the eyes, the voice, and most importantly, the mind, which is the center of all the senses. And so that's yukta vairagya, means that it's vairagya in yoga, detachment from material things in an organic, natural way because of becoming attached to Krishna. Now, conversely, there's polgu vairagya, the mayavadis, the impersonalists, who don't believe that there's ultimately a person out there, beautiful, the spiritual world. All of it is Maya, they say. That's why nirvishesha shunyavadi pasha, they say, tarine. Prabhupada is saving us, the Western by giving us genuine Bhagavad philosophy from this philosophy that says, no, the ultimate reality is pure spirit light with no details, no senses, no activities, no nothing, it's just freedom. Freedom from birth, death, old age, and disease, But how? But freedom from what? Freedom for? What are you free for? To do nothing, just to be free. It's not a satisfying philosophy, and the Bhagavatam says, "Aru akuchena param padam tata patantyado." Those who go up by great austerities. Can you imagine? Just trying to visualize what it would be like to try to control the senses and the mind, and not have any holy name, no prasadam, no association, no kirtan, no deities, just you and your mind, and your senses, right, to control. That's why it says kutrena. You hear the difficulty in that word? The Sanskrit has a lot of onomatopoeias in it. Kutrena means a few, by force of will, can absorb their mind in the undifferentiated Brahman and control those senses that are trying to get out of control and the mind, and rise up to the Brahman platform, where they just float. There's no form up there. There's no Krishna. There's no activities. There's no kirtan. There's nothing. But this verse says, because their minds are not pure, they're impure intelligence, and they're averse to serving your lotus feet because they don't believe in your lotus feet. They don't believe there's anybody out there with lotus feet. They fall down again to this material world, and somehow have some relationship. Sometimes, Prabhupada said they'll start hospitals or do some welfare work or something, So that's called polgu vairagya, and it's described this way. How does it start? Oh my God! Oh yeah. Prapantikataya buddhya harisambandhi vastunak mumukshubi padityago vairagyam polgu kachite. Now notice the word tyaga is in there. There's an important distinction between tyaga and vairagya. In the chapter 18 is called the perfection of renunciation, and Krishna talks a lot about tyaga there. Renunciation literally means to give it up. Just like there's some things we give up. No meat eating, no intoxication, you can't dovetail it, So that's tyaga. Renunciation, or that's renunciation in its strictest sense. But vairagya literally means dispassion. That's really what we're after. And that means that even in the presence of things that might have attracted us before we started chanting Hare Krishna, we don't feel any attraction. I like to give the example of, you remember in the old days when we used to go out on Harinam and chanting and dancing in the streets, procession, not just sitting. So we used to go every weekend, for years, and Friday night. So we go downtown. You want to go where there's a lot of people. And so there's always people down there. So we go in the gas lamp district. We used to go to La Jolla when I first came for a year or two, every Saturday night. Yeah. And then we finally realized people here are a little bit too hoity-toity, you got all this. They're a little bit too much into the, we're not making any devotees here, but we go downtown. So we started going down to the gas lamp, which they gentrified. So, especially on New Year's Eve, you'd find a whole bunch of people down there. You've been down, who don't come any other time. They would come from all over the area, So it's very crowded, So I remember distinctly this particular incident. So we're coming up to a corner, and we got a good party, 20, 30 devotees at least, Everybody's fired up. And as it happens, on every Friday night, what to speak on New Year's Eve, there's a bunch of ladies, the young ladies. What can I say? Scantily dressed, okay. And they're in an enjoying mood and everything, a little intoxicated, and we're just chanting away, And I'm just thinking, there's nothing happening there. There's no attraction. It's not like, oh my God, can I control my senses? No, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama. That's called Yukta Vairagya. That's the strength of intense Krishna consciousness, is that even in our contaminated state, we're not pure devotees yet, but you can experience that higher taste, which obviates the lower taste, which erases it. Or another example. This is even funnier. Back when I lived in Philadelphia in the early 80s, they have a place downtown near State Street, I think, which is like there's always an area downtown for tourists and everything. So this was a whole square, and there were no cars allowed. And so we would go down there and chant, and there's all of these high-class businesses, and one of them was some kind of bakery or something. And I think they specialize in chocolate chip cookies or something, And they knew very well the best way to attract people to buy the cookies is to pump out the fragrance of the freshly baked cookies or baking cookies into the square there, So as soon as you come in there, you can't miss the fragrance, But in our ordinary life before, that would be very attractive. But this is, it's not prasadam, it's not offered. There's no way, there's no, and you keep chanting. So this is called Yukta Vairagya. And this is two elements, Vairagya and Vidya. Vidya is very important also. Vidya means knowledge. They go together. And we experience this all the time. But I like to give the example. Some of you have heard it, but maybe you haven't heard this example. Often, I think we can say that one of the best and most varied feasts of the year is Prabhupada's appearance day, his Vyasa Puja day. We have this program in the morning, and then 2 o'clock. He's heard this example before. So there's all kinds. A lot of times, senior devotees will come in and cook, and they don't come any time of the year. So we find Madhusudan come in. He's like the seniorest devotee around. I mean, they joined in 66, 67. He and his wife, 26 Second Avenue. And Kanchan Bala, they're both wonderful devotees. So Madhusudan has perfected this art of making sweet rice for many years, So it's looked forward to, and it's expected. So this is a hypothetical. It didn't actually happen, but imagine like this: how knowledge can nourish your detachment. Okay. So the sweet rice is ready to come out, near the end of the, because the sweets are there, and everyone knows it's there. It's been cooled nicely in the cooler overnight. If he does it right, it's supposed to be kind of cool. And it's like strawberry sweet rice or something. So devotees come out, they have their 3 or 4 buckets, and it's about time, and everyone is looking forward. They've got their cups. They've put, at least 1 cup clean. And then just when they're ready to start, Madhusudan comes out of the kitchen, and he says, "Oh, wait, I'm so sorry, Prabhus, Mahajis, I'm so sorry. I put salt in instead of..." Oh. And as soon as he says that, the desire for that sweet rice is gone. Your knowledge that it's got salt in it has created detachment, you see. Now, on a more, that's a good example, but on a more serious and general note, the knowledge from the Shastra, I like to give these 2 verses. You've heard it before, but they're really key for understanding this truth about Krishna consciousness. In the 5th chapter, there's a verse, Yehi sangsparjaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate ajantamantang konteya nateshu ramate buddha. The pleasures that come from the senses contacting their objects are the sources of misery, and they have a beginning and an end. And therefore, O Kunti, the wise do not delight in them. Then where do they get their pleasure? Because we're pleasure seeking. Previous verse. Bhayas parshesh asaktatma vindajatmani yat sukham sab brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute. And what this means is that bhayas parsheshu asaktatma, not attracted to this contact of the senses with their sense objects. The real yogis, the bhakti yogis, they're enjoying the pleasure within by contacting, through bhakti yoga, Krishna, who's always in our heart, and who's a reservoir of pleasure. You've heard that phrase before, right? And the asakta vindayame sab brahma yoga yuktatma, linked up to that supreme Brahman, Krishna, through bhakti yoga, sukham akshayam ashnute. Now this is a very important phrase. It means they experience unbroken happiness. It doesn't have a beginning and an end. And we know from so many other verses, and it's ever increasing. But that idea that it's eternal, it's our birthright as spirit souls. We've lost that ability to enjoy that eternal happiness because we're putting our attention and our energy into this ever-changing material world. And as we've all experienced, a little time, just staying in this material world, these pleasures, you can aspire for it. If you have everything is in order, you can achieve it, but then it's in the rear view mirror, and all you've got is your memories, maybe your videos, and you're trying to achieve it again, and the circumstances that would happen, and every single one of these pleasures has a pain attached to it. Just like the food industry, they're very expert, these demons, how to engineer food, process food, so it has a certain taste, a mouthfeel, and everything. It's addictive. It's addictive, and it's bad for you, especially when you can't control and you're eating so many chips and so many things like that. So there's the perfect realization. The pleasure is there. There's no doubt about it, and you want to eat it again and again and again, experience more pleasure. But then, you get a weight problem, and it's horrible. So there's a big epidemic of obesity, even among children. So it's all based on this search of the soul for that pleasure that we've left in the spiritual world, and we're looking for it in the material world, and it's just causing us more and more pain and bondage. So withdrawing that enjoyment propensity from matter and trying to please our senses, serve our senses, serving Krishna, he reciprocates and gives us a pleasure that doesn't have a beginning and an end. Perfect example is the 6 Goswamis. The 6 Goswamis, like just constantly Rupa and Sanatan, they had it made materially. They were the right and left hand of the king. They had impossible wealth. Rupa Goswami, when he, say, cashed out, we'll call it, he had a whole boatload of gold, solid gold. You imagine what that would be worth today? Billions, And his whole point was, how can I, get rid of it, and then just go to Vrindavan and be a sannyasi? So he gave half of it, to the Brahmins and the Vaishnavas, gave a quarter of it to his family. Prabhupada said they expect something, okay. And then a quarter of it, he saved for emergencies, which Sanatan then used to bail himself, get himself out of jail, and he joined him, But when they finally came to Vrindavan, they led the most austere life you can imagine. It's like, can there be any more austere thing than having no home, hardly eating at all, or sleeping? What to speak of, mating and defending? That wasn't even a consideration.
But they were experiencing the happiness millions of times greater what they were experiencing in the kingly court. It's described like that. Tyakva mashesha mandada patishening sada tuchavat bhutvadina ganeshako karunaya kaupina kantashito gopi bhavada samatabna hari kallola magno mahur vande rupa sanatano ragya goshi jiva gopalago. So tyakva tunam, this is where tunam again comes up. They immediately gave it up. As soon as they got attracted to Lord Chaitanya, as soon as they, understood, they gave Ashesha Mandalapati Shrenim, unlimited influence and wealth, all of that aristocracy. Immediately gave it up. Tyakva means rejected. Tucha as insignificant, completely insignificant. And then Bhutvadina Ganesha Ko, they became the protectors and the benefactors of the most dina, the wretched of the earth. Basically, everyone who's ignorant of Krishna consciousness, they sacrificed. They had a mission. Lord Chaitanya gave them to write books, build temples, and excavate all of the lost places of pastimes in Vrindavan. So how were they going to excavate temples? They had no money, but they were so attractive that they attracted wealthy, pious kings who then built the temples for them. They all had temples eventually. So Bhutvadina and Karunaya, out of their compassion, they undertook this role, of great austerity and preaching. Kaupina Kandashito, they were just wearing rejected clothes that they found, and living simply as I described. But what was their state of mind? What was their actual experience? Gopi Bhavara Samatabdala Hari Kallorla Magdo Mahor. Again and again diving into the unlimited pleasures of Gopi Bhava, the highest levels of prema bhakti, which makes all of this external stuff completely insignificant. Now just see, we have our, people who are wearing the rejected clothes wandering around the streets of Pacific Beach, but they're not enjoying, they're really miserable. Because they're, we have compassion for them. What you can do, I give them a little prasadam. I once had some extra burritos, and there was some guys right back here, and I gave them all the burritos, and it was like, the best thing in their lives was fresh, hot burritos, But anyway, it's the difference in consciousness. It's not just being poor. That's nothing pious about that, But being of such a highest consciousness that you can completely tolerate this poverty and this austerity, while experiencing within the highest levels of Krishna. They were, so they're not worrying about going back to Godhead. They're already back to Godhead. They're already back to Godhead. So this is what's so great about Krishna consciousness. You can experience so much here if you advance, in your daily life. And you can become equipoise. So much of the Bhagavad Gita is about equipoise and happiness and distress. Because you see, it's just the modes of nature working, it's just the body doing its thing, I'm not going to forget Krishna or try to blame Krishna for my situation. But I'm just going to double down and, chant with more sincerity and thank the Lord that He's minimizing. It could be so much worse, we're in the middle of COVID, but here we are. We still take prasadam, we still have the deity, we're chanting, That's what counts. So, the basic thing here is that devotees, although the devotees know about these two pairs, they're never bewildered by them, and they're not concerned about them. If you're really a devotee. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. And the next verse, which is the last in the chapter, we can end this chapter. You'll see why that everything is everything that's gained by all these other means is automatically gained by bhakti. Any questions or comments? I may have gone a little far afield, but I think it was worth it. Prabhupada did refer to that verse, Anasaktasya Vishaya. He opened the door. Vedeshu yaggeshu tapaksu chaiva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam atjeti tat samidam atjeti tat sarvamidam viditva yogi padam sthanam upaiti chadhyam. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. Purport. This verse is the summation of the 7th and 8th chapters, which particularly deal with Krishna consciousness and devotional service. One has to study the Vedas under the guidance of the spiritual master and undergo many austerities and penances while living under his care. A brahmachari has to live in the home of the spiritual master just like a servant, and he must beg alms from door to door and bring them to the spiritual master. He takes food only under the master's order, and if the master neglects to call the student for food that day, the student fasts. These are some of the Vedic principles for observing brahmacharya. After the student studies the Vedas under the master for some time, at least from age 5 to 20, he becomes a man of perfect character. Study of the Vedas is not meant for the recreation of armchair speculators, but for the formation of character. After this training, the brahmachari is allowed to enter into household life and marry. When he is a householder, he has to perform many sacrifices so that he may achieve further enlightenment. He must also give charity according to the country, time, and candidate, discriminating among charity in goodness, in passion, and in ignorance, as described in the Bhagavad Gita. Then, after retiring from household life, upon accepting the order of Vanaprastha, he undergoes severe penances, living in forests, dressing with tree bark, not shaving, etc. By carrying out the orders of brahmacharya, householder life, Vanaprastha, and finally sannyas, one becomes elevated to the perfectional stage of life. Some are then elevated to the heavenly kingdoms, and when they become even more advanced, they are liberated in the spiritual sky, either in the impersonal Brahmajyoti or in the Vaikuntha planets or Krishna Loka. This is the path this is the path outlined by Vedic literatures. The beauty of Krishna consciousness, however, is that by one stroke, by engaging in devotional service, one can surpass all the rituals of the different orders of life. The words idam viditva indicate that one should understand the instructions given by Sri Krishna in this chapter and the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. One should try to understand these chapters not by scholarship or mental speculation, but by hearing them in association with devotees. Chapters 7 through 12 are the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. The first 6 and the last 6 chapters are like coverings for the middle 6 chapters, which are especially protected by the Lord. If one is fortunate enough to understand the Bhagavad Gita, especially these middle 6 chapters, in the association of devotees, then his life at once becomes glorified beyond all penances, sacrifices, charities, speculations, etc. For one can achieve all the results of these activities simply by Krishna consciousness. One who has little faith in the Bhagavad Gita should learn the Bhagavad Gita from a devotee, because in the beginning of the 4th chapter it is stated clearly that the Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees. No one else can perfectly understand the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. One should therefore learn the Bhagavad Gita from a devotee of Krishna, not from mental speculators. This is a sign of faith. When one searches for a devotee and fortunately gets a devotee's association, one actually begins to study and understand the Bhagavad Gita. By advancement in the association of the devotee, one is placed in devotional service, and this service dispels all one's misgivings about Krishna or God, and Krishna's activities, form, pastimes, name, and other features. After these misgivings have been perfectly cleared away, one becomes fixed in one's study. Then one relishes the study of the Bhagavad Gita and attains the state of feeling always Krishna conscious. In the advanced stage, one falls completely in love with Krishna. This highest perfectional stage of life enables the devotee to be transferred to Krishna's abode in the spiritual sky, Goloka Vrindavan, where the devotee becomes eternally happy. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 8th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of attaining the Supreme. So, we've come a long way in this 8th chapter, and I'm just going to review a little bit here. I always like to go back to what I consider the essence of the chapter, which are texts 5, 6, and 7. In text 5, Krishna gives kind of the point of the whole thing. Antakale tamameva smadan mukva kalevaram yak priyati samadbhavam yati nastyatra sangshaya. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone and once attains my nature, of this there is no doubt. In the Bhagavatam, in the 2nd canto, right at the very beginning, Shukadeva Goswami says the same instruction, more or less. He says, Etaban Sankhya Yogabhyam Swadharma Parinishtada Janmalabhak Purak Pungsam Ante Narayana Smriti. Ante Narayana Smriti literally means remembering Narayan at the end of life. So whatever you do in terms of Sankhya or yoga or varnashram, it'll be perfected and successful if it helps you remember Narayan, Krishna at the end of life. So then, because then you go to Krishna. It comes to my nature, comes back home to me. Then the text 6 gives the general principle, which we've been experiencing now since millions and millions of births. Yang vapi smarang bhavat jadat jante kalevanam tam tavevaiti konta yasanata bhava bhavita. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state one will attain without fail. So this is a principle that is, it never changes. We are a complex. What is our body, right? We know from the 7th chapter, Earth, Water, Fire, Ether, we have these senses, it's a very complicated machine of the body, but we also have a subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and ego. And this comprises who we are, And of course, within everything is the soul. So, as we go through life, we're interacting with this material world in so many complex ways. As a human being, we have this mind, and we have so much knowledge, and our memory is much more acute than animals and lower beings. So, as we interact with this world, we're creating impressions in the mind, pleasurable, painful, right? Things we want to, try to do again, things we want to forget about. So it's a very complex affair, and if there's no Krishna consciousness involved, then as we are relating to the world and under the modes of nature, we're creating a certain mindset, and we're also creating a certain karmic record, and those two together is what determines our next life. What our main thought or state of consciousness will be when we leave. It's not just some roulette wheel that we happen to think of Krishna and go back. No, because as Prabhupada explains in these purports, what you do during your life determines what you're going to think of at the time of death. So, understanding the science, we should try to be thinking of Krishna as much as possible and trying to become as Krishna conscious, so that we never know when that end may come, and so we'll be ready. So this is the general principle here. And therefore, text 7, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhicha mayapadamano bodhir mama vaishesya sankshaya. Therefore, O Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of, and we can fill in the blank. Now, in our ashram life, we're given duties that help us remind us of Krishna, so this is very fortunate. But in any circumstance, we have to try to inject as much Krishna remembrance as possible. That's what it's talking about. Now, Arjuna, when he finally surrenders and fights for Krishna, naturally he's going to be thinking of Krishna. He's got him right on the chariot there, So. But this is why, it's an effort to mold our life in such a way that we're thinking of Krishna as much as possible. That's the idea. That's what the whole process is for. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without a doubt. So that's that's a lesson in itself. I remember whenever I was asked to give a Sunday lecture, I would often speak on these 3 verses, and in these purports, probably each one he talks about chanting Hare Krishna. He mentions the mantra. So that's the essence of the whole thing here, and Krishna is describing, I pointed out, some of you, how he goes into the third person in text 9, 10, 11, he's describing how one should think of him. And Prabhupada always brings it back in the purports. There's another chants Hare Krishna. There's another one in the text 13. He's constantly addressing or emphasizing chanting the holy name. Om is here. And then there's some very often quoted verses, especially 15 and 16. Mamo peja puna janma dukale mashasvatam. That if someone that comes back to me, they don't have to return to this world, which is dukale mashasvatam, is a place of misery and is also very temporary. Anyway, we've run out of time now. We're going to launch into chapter 9 on Monday, and that is the really one of the most essential chapters, the most confidential knowledge. So don't miss out either locally or by Zoom, and we'll continue then with that. Sorry I didn't leave time for questions. I kind of got carried away, as I've been getting these days. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.